Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. These are both the same knife. They are the, unfortunately, discontinued Spyderco Southard, both the standard brown G10 or Coyote G10 and tumbled blade, and then the later released black G10 and black blade. They're both the same materials, same blade steel, just different colors. To my knowledge, these were the only variants available. I don't believe that there was a carbon fiber variant available, but I can't remember. These, like I said, these have been discontinued for a while. Because these are discontinued Spyderco's, price goes out the window. I have no idea what aftermarket prices are doing to these guys. Yeah, it's not really something that I can talk about. This is more so like just me, remembering when these knives were available and very, very popular. And I always wanted to get my hands on one, but I never did, So I have to thank two people for sending these guys along, and that's at Husby_84, who sent me the black one, and at Amateur Knives, who sent me the standard Coyote G10 version. Thank you so much. Please give them a follow on Instagram. It's because of people like them that I'm able to bring you guys daily knife content. I can't remember who offered theirs up first, but when the second person offered theirs up and I realized it was a different version, I thought, yeah, that would be kind of cool to have them both in the same video. That way I can talk about them. Let's go ahead and get a measurement on these guys. Obviously, measurements and things like that are going to be identical. We'll leave them both out here. Overall length on the Spyderco Southard coming in at 8 inches. Blade length coming in at right about 3.5. So it's going to be right in that sweet spot. These, by the way, are Brad Southard. What is the word that I'm looking for? It's a collaboration. Dear goodness. Collaboration between Brad Southard and Spyderco. Brad Southard, famous for models like the Tolk, which I believe is actually what this is based on. Anyways, let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the let's do it up against the Hinder XM18, because in a lot of ways, the Spyderco Southard, I've always thought this is the reason why I was initially attracted to these, because they were running on bearings. These are running on bearings. They've got G10, they've got a steel liner underneath, they've got a titanium frame lock side, and then they have a CTS 204P blade. Now, back in Generation 4, when Hinders were primarily S35VN and running on nylon, right? To me, this production Spyderco was in a lot of ways like a Rick Hinderer knife. I mean, take a look at it from this angle. Tell me that that does not scream Hinderer. I mean, it's very similar in a lot of ways. In fact, it's a lot like if you mixed a Spyderco PM2 and a Hinderer together, you'd kind of get this guy, maybe a Hinderer with a sheep's foot. So, considering the price was substantially less than a Hinder XM18, and it was a lot easier to get a Spyderco Southard then, I considered many times giving up hope on acquiring an XM18 and just going with a Spyderco Southard. I think they were actually kind of on their way out there. But anyways, the Spyderco Southard, not quite as long as Hinder XM18. XM18's coming in at 8.25 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in exact same length at about 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Para 3's coming in at 7.25 inches overall. How's the action on these guys? Well, I don't think either one of them appear to be used, but I'll tell you this. This one's a little bit tight. Little bit. It needs a little bit of encouragement, but I can still flip it. This one flips beautifully. Neither one of them are completely false shut, but false shut action back then, when I say back then, I think these were 2000... Somebody can help me out. 2013 to 2016, maybe 17, was when these guys were around. False shut action on a production knife in this price range was not something that was like, yeah, it absolutely should be there, kind of like it is today, or that you get more often today. But, I mean, a good flipping action. I mean, these were known for being like, yeah, these flip well. They've got good detents. They're snappy, right? So I would say good action for, I mean, truthfully today, if I'm trying to think about how to relate price to this, and I'm not going to because it doesn't make any sense. But I suppose if I could equivalate to the value that they were putting, that was on these knives back then versus what value is today, I would be satisfied with the action for today. Not so much with this guy. This guy's a little gritty, but I have a feeling it just needs to be loosened up a little bit, which I'm not going to do because it looks to be in really good condition. I'm not going to touch it with my tools. But yeah, I have to imagine most of them are going to be like this. So I'd say pretty good. Solid B on action. Let's talk about carry profile here real quick. So these are thick, especially the side with the G10 scales. I've never understood what the purpose was for making the G10 so thick. I think the liner is actually, well, my Hinder does not have the liner in it. It's full tie, but as you can see here, it's basically the same thickness as the Hinder XM18. I mean, it is very, very, very similar. So we can put them up like this. Possibly the Hinder ever so slightly thicker, but they're thick knives. That being said, though, it's really, I mean, anybody who can justify a Hinder or a knife of the same thickness is going to be okay with these guys. In terms of height, up against two knives that are, awkward in carry profile that nobody ever complains about, you can see that they're nowhere near as tall as the Spyderco PM2 or Spyderco Para 3. So the banana shape of this knife and the curvature of the knife actually allows it to fall nicely into your pocket, despite the pocket clip not being my favorite thing in the whole world. We're going to talk about that because one of these has a great aftermarket clip on it. So yeah, not bad in terms of carry profile. Let's talk about weight. And I'm just realizing that unfortunately my scale seems to be missing from, oh, here it is. I was like, am I going to have to cut the video really to find my scale? Let's go ahead and weigh this guy, or these guys. Zero it out here. First one coming in at about 4 ounces. And how about this guy? Same thing, roughly exactly the same, a little bit over 4 ounces. So a standard XM18 with the G10 scale. I'm relating this to the XM18 because this was in a lot of ways a challenger to the XM18 when it was most popular, at least in my eyes, right? So we have nearly the same thickness, very similar blade lengths, a little more cutting edge on this guy, right? And similar blade thickness, honestly. I mean, 165 thousandths on the XM18, and I'm gonna get, I'm trying to focus in for you guys. I'm gonna guess about 150 thousandths on the Southard. Let's go ahead and give that a shot here real quick so you guys can see. 142, we'll give it one more shot before we just move on because these calipers are not great. Okay, we'll call it 145 thousandths. So a little bit thinner blade, but I think just overall height of both blade and scale and thickness of all the materials, it's actually about an ounce, a little under 1.25 ounces less than a standard Hinder XM18 with the G10 scale. So actually, in my opinion, the ratios are pretty good. It's right there on that mark, where a lot of people just used to go by 4 ounces is right there on the sweet spot. Anything over 4 ounces is heavy. Anything under is super light. So a lot of people really liked the weight on these guys. I think that's about it for the initial part of this. These guys are not going to be available. I always talk about the store at the beginning of the video. There are no links for these guys. There's nowhere to buy them. I think your only bet is to purchase them on the secondary market. If you find them listed as new anywhere, the prices are probably through the roof. I would guess that's what tends to happen. So anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at the anatomy of these knives. We have a very thick G10 scale, peel ply textured. By the way, these were manufactured in Taichung, Taiwan. These were not US Spydercos, but many people know that Taichung, Taiwan, in terms of Spyderco, the knives that are manufactured there the Spyderco knives that are manufactured there have probably the best fit and finish of any Spyderco knives in existence, even above their US, their US line. But anyways, we've got pivot screw. We've got a few body screws back here. Nicely chamfered G10 scale. We'll talk more about that. We have a beautiful sheep's foot blade. You can see there it's pretty thick. There's a flat that runs out about 75% or so, carrying a lot of thickness down to the tip here. I believe these are, if I'm not mistaken, these are hollow ground. So you do get reasonably thin behind the edge, but it does sort of dramatically thicken out. So, I mean, in terms of like slicing, things like that, you might be okay, but if you're going to push the entire blade through something, it might be a little tiny bit of hang up. In terms of general EDC, I mean, these things are going to be great. The blade shape's going to be great. You're going to be able to do a lot of different things with it. It's comfortable to hold. In terms of where you put your finger up here, it's very comfortable, so that's nice. The blade looks great all the way down. I don't believe this one's been used at all. This is CTS 204P, which is Carpenter's version of M390 or CPM 20CV. It's the exact same composition. I have no idea how these were heat treated. Spyderco has always been pretty good about their heat treatment though, so it was probably just fine. That was one of the draws to this knife for a lot of people over the Hinder XM18, and this knife was also compared to the ZT-0562 because it was using, it had the G10 scale, and you had to pay extra to get back then it was the M390 version of the 0562, and it had a carbon fiber scale. But I believe it was slightly more expensive than this guy. I could be wrong, but they were very similar prices. But 204P was very appealing over the standard ZT-0562's LMAX because people just wanted M390 over LMAX back then, and I can't remember. I think ZT had a problem with the heat treatment of LMAX. I can't remember back then, not now. But yeah, so it was very, very appealing, and the fact that it was this, the beefy overbuilt titanium frame lock, it was something different for Spyderco. Brad Southard was making designs that were very popular, so a lot of people were excited to get their hands on a, basically a production Southard custom. So that's pretty cool. That's why, this was so popular. I will say that it's definitely weird how thick the G10 scale is. But, I mean, I don't know. I mean, in hand and in pocket, it's really not that cumbersome. It's definitely thick. I mean, I notice it over knives that are a little bit thinner, but not so much that I think it would be a deal breaker. I think by today's standard, people would look at it and go, why is it thick? It's weird. It's weird that it's thick. I don't know that it really... I mean, it's basically what I'm saying. I don't know that anybody else would draw any other conclusion, right? It's not going to cause such a severe issue in the pocket. If you carry other things in your pocket besides your folding, like your front, like for me, I carry my knives in my front right pocket. If I carried anything else, that thickness or the flipper tab might bother me. But since I only carry the knife and I wear jeans, right, there's lots of room in my pockets, it doesn't bother me. It's just kind of awkward. The access to this thumb hole, speaking of awkward, is awkward. There's very little chance. I mean, yeah, you can do it. I don't want to say very little. You can definitely do it, but I find that I violently run my thumb into this area right here, and after 2 or 3 flicks, it's just not that comfortable. It's definitely much easier to use the flipper tab. There's no double clutch. It's comfortable. The flipper tab is shaped really, really well. It's nicely rounded off, which is actually the case with the entire blade. It's very, very well rounded. No sharp edges or anything like that. Functional jimping, but not aggressive. It's just the blade that's sharp, which is the way that it should be. The access here is just odd. I mean, I suppose if you're in a situation where you don't want to fire it open and you just want to sort of pinch it open or just sort of wheel it out, and that's nice, you have that option. But it's kind of weird. I don't know why there's a secondary. I kind of wish that this whole area was just more scalloped and less of this sort of sharp, aggressive drop into the opening hole. But whatever, they're not going to make changes to it now. Other than that, though, the scale's fine. We do, unfortunately, have, let me get out my handy dandy WIA bit selector and WIA magnetic driver, 2 items that are extremely recommendable. This is the stubby magnetic driver, by the way. Extremely recommendable and extremely inexpensive. You can find them down there in my Amazon store that I talked about at the beginning of the episode under knife maintenance, along with a bunch of other useful items. So check that out. I'm going to guess, in fact, I'm almost certain actually, that the pivot is a T10. I'll go ahead and check that here real quick. Well, let's put it in the driver, right? It's always fun to feel that magnetic click. I always like that. Talked about that in Fidget Factor. Yeah, we got a T10 for the pivot. That's always great. And then for whatever reason, which no fault here, I mean, there's knives that are manufactured here in 2020 that are doing the same thing that always bothers me. T6 likely. is what we're seeing on the pivot screws. Let's take a look here. Yep, T6. Don't like that. Definitely don't like that. You know, that was a problem if you stripped the screw. You probably could find a T6 screw that was exactly the same, you know, that you could order from some supplier somewhere here in the United States. But if you stripped a screw and you needed warranty work and you had to wait, you know, I don't know. I don't know how long it took or if it made a difference because these knives were made in the Taichung, Taiwan plant. In any case, I do not like T6 screws because they are easy to strip. I talk about that all the time. Not a deal breaker, that's fine. Moving down here, you can see we've got a nice large lanyard hole, which was definitely much more of a thing back then, so people liked that. It's also the tube, so you can see the tube acts as an additional standoff. We have very Hinderer-esque standoffs back here. Black on the black version. Sorry, let's see if we can get it to focus. Black on the black version and satin on the tumbled version. They're very, very similar to Hinderer XM18 standoffs, just a little bit smaller, but you can see here, especially on the tumbled one, I mean, it's extremely similar, you know. The only difference there is really the barrel. Very thick, what I assume is stainless steel on that. Let's test it. I got a magnetic angle square here that I've still yet to use. No, that's titanium. Sorry guys, I was wrong. Titanium liner and titanium frame lock. I really like the tumbling that they've got going. It's kind of halfway between Hinderer's Stonewash and their working finish. Here's a little bit darker finish on the We Knife Scorpion. It's kind of in between. It's got a slight reflectivity to it. I always found that to be very appealing, especially in contrast with the beautiful tumbling that you see on the standard version. Taichung Taiwan still does that beautiful tumbling on their, you know, on their knives that they tumble, and I just love that. It looks so nice, you know. This version, I wish that they had done this with a black scale. And it was very popular for people to just buy both and take the black scale off and put it on this guy. I saw people doing that all the time. I don't think Spyderco did that on purpose, but there were a lot of people who bought both just to do that. Or people who sold their black scale or whatever, you know, and people who paid a lot of money for the scale, or people who bought aftermarket scales, right, to get the combination that they wanted. In any case, I mean, that's what I would have wanted. I would have wanted a black scale. I think now people would just dye it. I don't know if they were doing it as much back then, but anyways, that's what I would have wanted. On the other side, you can see here we've got the pocket clip, which I do not like. We'll talk about that here in a sec. Some interesting cutouts there on the relief cut, and then we have this little piece of G10 that's actually acting as the over travel stop. This guy, it's on both of them. It was kind of the same thing as the, because it also acts as a stabilizer, meaning it stabilizes the lock bar from moving this way and out, or bending out, right? So it's interesting, that little piece of G10 does that. This is before we started putting steel lock bar inserts on everything. So you can see there, this doesn't have it. That one's locking up a little bit earlier than this one. This one's locking up a little bit later, but I think it was pretty common for these to lock up anywhere from 25% to about 50%, which is still basically the same thing that we see today. I always say the same thing, you know, it's nice that we have steel lock bar inserts on a lot of our titanium frame locks now, because if it wears over or there's an issue with geometry, the chip can simply be popped out and a new one can be popped in that's got the correct geometry, or basically a new face, right? On these old ones, knives like this, the titanium lock faces were carbidized, which helped with wear over time, and at the same time, it's actually a little bit safer because titanium on titanium, or I'm sorry, carbidized titanium on a steel tang is a little bit more sticky. Not lock sticky, but it's a little bit, there's more friction there, so it's a little bit safer than the slippery surface of a steel lock bar insert on a steel tang. That's not to say that you're unsafe using a titanium frame lock that's got a steel lock bar insert. It just means that the geometry is ever more important, right? There has to be a lot of surface contact so that you've got the necessary friction. Anyways, yeah, it seems to have suited these knives just fine. That's pretty similar to what I see with Lockup on these guys across the board. Let's take a look at this pocket clip. This is the standard pocket clip. It's very pointy and has this bill thing, and it's awkward, and it doesn't really go with the knife. And then we've got this one here that's got a beautiful aftermarket clip, much more modern clip. It's nice and deep carry. This knife didn't necessarily carry shallow, but it was just kind of awkward. The pocket clip honestly looks like an afterthought in this knife. Like, everything on this knife honestly still looks great. Sorry, I'm having to give this one a little bit of wrist. It still looks great. I love how this looks, right? Part of me wishes that they'd bring it back, but I don't know. I don't know that the world really, you know, wants another one of these right now. But it's just my nostalgia, I think, that's pouring out of me. But this pocket clip was definitely kind of an afterthought. That's very pointy. And while I gotta admit, it's really not much of a hot spot. If you pulled back on it, you're definitely gonna catch it. It's more so unsightly. A pocket clip like this, while not necessarily going directly with the theme of the knife, and I gotta admit, I don't know what a pocket clip that went with the theme of this knife would look like. It's definitely, I mean, that's a pocket clip that I would enjoy a lot more, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. Both of these knives are still centered. You can see there some nice centering on this guy, and same with this guy, still centered. I don't believe that these knives are used. Neither one of them have any blade play, any hint of blade play. I don't think these knives ever had an issue with that. Really, my only issues with these knives are they're a little bit thick on the G10. They're using some T6 screws. These cutouts right here are awkward, not inaccessible, but a little bit awkward. And then the standard pocket clip kind of sucked. But other than that, I mean, these knives were heavily regarded as really good knives, and you were getting great materials, great fit and finish for the money. People weren't as accepting of Taichung Taiwan produced Spydercos then as they are now. There were a lot of people who had been buying, were like, hey, these things are great. But I remember kind of, you know, getting into blade forums around 2011, 12-ish, and, you know, 13, somewhere around there, and being like, why do those cost so much money? I don't know. And it's just in my mind back then, I was like, how can they cost that much money if they're not US made, right? Because I was newer to the scene and had learned like US, you know, knives were really, really good and using premium materials. So it was hard for me to wrap my head around that. But, you know, now people kind of understand, you know, hey, Taichung makes some of the best, if not the best Spydercos around. So these knives, I think, were part of what helped with that turning point, or at least it wouldn't surprise me if that were the case. These are great knives. I really wish that they were still around. I have no idea what they would cost now, but they're really, really interesting. I mean, if you're really wanting to go after one of these knives and you're wondering like, hey, I'm going to pay what I'm going to pay, right? I see value in that knife. I've decided I want it. I'm going to find one. I'm not going to tell you what to pay for it, but what I will tell you is if you can find one that's in really good condition, that's been taken care of, you're going to be happy with it. If you can overlook some of the quirks that I talked about, you're going to be happy with this knife. If you plan to use it, I think it'll make a great user. It's going to be a little bit bulky, but not heavy, which is kind of weird, right? When something is like kind of thick, but it's not heavy, you usually expect those two things to go together. I don't know. That's really all that I can say. This is a good looking knife. I miss it. It's part of the world that I kind of, you know, was introduced to when I mean, in the newer part of this for me. So I just miss these knives, definitely. But anyways, thanks so much again to the people who sent these to me. Like I said, give them a follow, and also check out the links in my description. That's going to be pretty much it today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out, and if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.